Okay, I'm recording now. And all right, so from Italian Baroque to French Baroque, let's do, so there are some, I think some, well, we talk a little bit about what the French Baroque is. Um, the so the French monarchy supported um, a lot of the creation of, I guess they were the French monarchy was a patron of a lot of architecture and interior furnishings, and that is mostly associated with uh, with Louis the 14th. Um, Henry the Fourth was his father. Um, so the there was this was it started before Louis the 14th. Um, but he's really known as being like the one who really um, accelerated the patronage of furniture and tapestries and created workshops. The Louvre, which is now a French museum of art, was originally a uh, location for workshops that produced furniture, mirrors, tapestries, carpets, and these were all, they were all supported by the French government and the French monarch, and it really pushed the I guess the quality when when you are making furniture for the most important person in the country, then it has to be the best. And it so the Louis the 14th create like I mean really he there was like an entire like a ministry of furniture that oversaw the production of um, of furniture and the maintaining quality standards. So the we're going to look at Versailles, which was originally like a smaller like the architecture on it was like a smaller hunting lodge, which is maybe like not a log cabin that you might have here, but it was expanded into a really a vast estate outside of Paris. Um, there was I guess an experience when Louis the 14th was, I believe it was when he was a teenager, when he was the Prince Regent, and a mob of angry, I guess what might be called commoners, attacked the royal entourage, and they had to run for their lives. And apparently, this it suggested that this stayed with him. And at that time, the French ruling family lived in Paris. He moved the French court out to Versailles, away from Paris, where they were put some distance between themselves and a lot of the people that were unhappy about inequality and the excesses of the French ruling class, which is understandable. Um, all that inequity led to the French Revolution, which cost Louis XVI his life. So Louis XIV was really, similar in a way to like, I guess Egyptian pharaohs. He sort of played up this idea of being a divinely anointed monarch. Um, from he ruled until 1715, um, and well, we're going to see examples of his of a lot of examples from Versailles and just what it meant that he was a patron of the arts, um, and specifically furniture. Um, we saw the tapestry workshop of Gobelin. Um, that was established in 1662, and that became a. It started out. It was a royal furniture factory that supplied the palaces with furniture and decorative works. Eventually, uh, specialized in tapestry weaving only. Savonnerie is another manufacturing. I guess that what would be called a manufactory of carpets, and the Savonnerie is named for the building was a former soap factory, so it was the Savonnerie, and they just kept the name and they made carpets. So Savonnerie was carpets. Gobelin became tapestry. We're going to look at. I'm going to show you some videos of marquetry. Marquetry is well, it's like a veneer made up of pieces of wood. We looked at some intarsia with the for the Italian Renaissance. It's basically the same thing, and it's shows off some of the skill that went into some of this furniture. There are, so I'm going to show you. Let's just do that now before we look at this stuff. I'm going to show you some of the. Share my screen. Thought I was sharing my screen, so you couldn't see that I had that up. Okay. That. All right, so here in the process videos section, so it's in course materials, process videos, marquetry. So this is a short. It's a short video from. Where did my other one go?
Marquetry, or wood mosaics, are made by arranging hundreds of small, separately cut pieces of wood into an intricate design.
Okay, I have one for marquetry. I'll have to look that back up. All right, so let's look at this. This is from the Getty Museum, which is in Los Angeles. So the video quality could be, excuse me, a little bit better, but you can still see what's going on. So these are, I think this was maybe made in like the 1990s, but there are people that do restorations that can still use the old tools and restore old pieces using old techniques.
The process for making marquetry began when a craftsman drew, or more often traced, a design on paper. This drawing was then secured to a sheet of heavy brown paper. Following the lines of the drawing, the craftsman perforated the pattern. Although now made with a device similar to a sewing machine, during the 18th century, thousands of holes had to be laboriously punched by hand with a needle. This heavy sheet, called the pounce pattern, was laid on top of a sheet of white paper. The craftsman then rubbed graphite over the surface of the perforated pattern to transfer the design to the bottom sheet. The design could be reproduced several times using this method. The wood was then sliced into thin sheets called veneers. In the 1700s, skilled artisans using a cumbersome handheld saw could cut veneer as thin as 1 millimeter. Elaborate marquetry designs required dozens of types of wood, some chosen for their natural color, some for the interesting patterns in their grain. Others were dyed to produce vivid colors. Copies of the design were carefully cut into petals, leaves, and other elements. These small paper patterns were used as guides for cutting the veneer into hundreds of individual pieces. Multiple sheets of veneer were then nailed together into packets. Then, using animal glue, the patterns for the leaves and petals were affixed to the veneer packet. Having secured the packet in a special vise and cutting frame, the craftsman cut out the individual pieces using a jigsaw. This allowed him to make multiple copies of each piece. Hot sand was then poured over certain pieces to burn shadows, creating a sense of depth and movement in the composition. The numerous pieces were now ready to be assembled into the final design. Once the background had been cut out, it was glued onto another copy of the design. Each piece was laid face down. When all the pieces had been put together, the craftsman was ready to flip the assembled marquetry and glue it to a piece of furniture. The supporting paper design was then removed and the surface was cleaned. The marquetry was now complete and ready to decorate an object like this writing and toilette table.
What do you think about that?
That looks like a ton of work.
Yeah, how long did it take to create one of these pieces of furniture?
I don't know, but considering that this was, this was how you did it. So this was the, the most, I guess they were what they were like that was at one time was the latest technology. So
Wow.
before the Industrial Revolution, before machines could be, were used to, repetitively, cut things or, things had to be done with hand tools by people very, very on. They take time. That's why that's one reason why, you know, um, I know people that make furniture by hand, and they do, some. It's not necessarily to the, to the, as elaborate as a Baroque writing desk, but their furniture is expensive because it takes it takes time and skill to make it. So, but I've seen like I do printmaking, and I've made woodcuts. I've made wood engravings, and wood engraving is a challenging thing to do. And there used to be a way to do commercial illustration, and something that would take me a really long time as an artist to make, a wood engraver could make it in like an afternoon, because that was what they did for a living, and they were fast, and they were so experienced with it that they could just do it quickly. Yeah. So I want to see the you know what I'm going to do. There we go. There was this. So the Victoria and Albert is another good museum to look at for this. So the Boule marquetry was named for a guy. André Charles Boule. It was a type of marquetry that used cut metal and tortoiseshell and wood, and very very beautiful, and the technique became very popular, and so people copied it, but it retained the name of the man that invented it. So you'll see some of this stuff too. So this has no sound. There. So okay. So this is a modern demonstration of something of like how this technique worked. So they're using finer and finer abrasive to polish the surface, and then they engrave. And then more charcoal powder. Ta-da. All right, so that I show you that to give you some appreciation for what it takes to make some of this stuff. And if you're ever in England, in London, and you want to see a great museum of decorative arts and other I guess applied arts, as people prefer calling it now, go to the Victoria and Albert, usually abbreviated as the V&A. Queen Victoria, Prince Albert established it. Okay. Now, the Baroque in France. So as I mentioned, the French recruited Italian um, craftspeople to come up and work for them. Here is Louis XIV, a very fancy guy. He is dressed for a costume for ballet of the night, 1653. Louis XIV as the Apollo. The sun was a personal symbol. He's often referred to as the Sun King, and Apollo is a sun god. Whoops. So this sort of like, kind of like a sun motif is one of the motifs that is associated with Louis XIV. So this is the grounds of Versailles. Looks kind of chaotic, but it's also very, very large. It's really this vast, vast estate. There's a photo of part of it, center block of the palace. And Versailles became kind of a model for other monarchs in Europe at the time. And they kind of, I guess it became copied by other monarchs as the standard for for the estate of the king or the monarch or queen. So you can see, can you see there's a relationship with the classical architecture? It has some similarities to some of the Italian Baroque churches. But a lot of these pilasters, so off on the right here, a pilaster with what looks like a Corinthian capital, but the capital is in gold. So there's a lot of gold. Gold is a really good way to show off, either gilding or something that's, something that is solid gold. It's a good way to show off. Also notice these mirrors, this like panels filling this sort of like this arched shape, and the very large chandeliers. There's no electrical light at this time. Electricity isn't, electricity for lighting isn't employed until the 19th century, and really successfully for interiors not until the very end or beginning of the 20th century, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. So if you want to light a big place like this, a lot of candles and the mirrors help to help the light to be reflected around the interior. So mirrors and candlelight are a good way to amplify lighting. Okay, here is a stock photo of a masquerade in the Hall of Mirrors. So here is a painting of the Doge of Genoa meeting Louis XIV in 1685. So, a painting like this is meant to be symbolic, but you can see the diagonal composition. Bow before the monarch. He's standing up on the dais where where there is a throne, and wigs were in fashion for men, so he's wearing a very spectacular wig. Solid silver vase holding an orange tree. So here's the kind of thing that might have been made for Versailles. Solid silver. That's expensive. That's a way of showing off how much money you have. There were times when, if they were fighting wars, which they were fighting, they were often fighting the Prussians and the Germans, and the Austrians. I guess would have been like It wasn't really Germany at this time. But there were times when they, if they ran into any kind of like a financial pinch, they would have to take some of this solid silver furniture and melt it down. But I guess that's kind of like, I guess maybe that's like savings account. Like, oh, we'll just melt the furniture. Okay, so here the Salon of War in Versailles. So a lot of this is really meant to celebrate Louis XIV. The French, part of the French success in was military, and that goes back to before Louis XIV became the emperor. He was officially the emperor before he was old enough to be the emperor, and so he had a regent named Cardinal Mazarin, who was really kind of like a foreign minister, secretary of state, and regent that really ruled France until Louis XIV was old enough to take the throne. But Cardinal Mazarin helped to set things up well for Louis, and so there was the military success helped to establish like I guess it made France helped to make France a more powerful, really like it was really like when France became a powerful nation was with Louis XIV. Paris, like France and Versailles, and later Paris also became at this time they starts to become like the like kind of like the cultural capital of Europe. It shifts from Italy to France in this period of time, where this is where everything things that are stylish, things that are progressive, or like even just like really like the contemporary stuff is being done in France. A difference between the Italian Baroque and the French Baroque is French Baroque really kind of centers around Louis XIV. And he is a secular leader. He is not the Pope. He is not a religious leader, except for his, like, I guess, being able to claim that he is a divine monarch, which is, I guess if you have complete authority, then you can claim, you can then say, I'm a divine monarch. The church didn't necessarily, I guess, well, Italian Baroque is centered on the Christian church. French Baroque is centered on Louis XIV and the French monarchy. So the difference is that French Baroque is not really religious. And this is kind of like a big deal that the French monarch becomes more powerful than the church. And that's, it wasn't that he wasn't, that he had rejected the church or anything like that. But it was really unusual for a secular leader, like a monarch, to rival or even, surpass the power of the church. So here you can see like Roman elements up here. This urn with the little amorini and the garland. That's, this is Roman. So they're still using, Roman stuff. The mirrors to, you all know what like mirrors do. They make a space look bigger. And in, as I said earlier, in this case, it's very important, when you want to do something at nighttime before electrical lighting, you needed to have a way to get the light bouncing around off surfaces, and mirrors are a great way to do it. Here's the king's bedchamber. So there's this these like it's kind of like architecture within the architecture. You have the balustrade separating the actual bed from the rest of the room. A whole lot of gold to show off his wealth. You see the classical Greek and Roman elements, a lot of Roman, and the bed with the canopy, valance, and curtains, which are very, very precious tapestries. And here is a tapestry. So this is Charles Lebrun. This is a tapestry of Louis XIV visiting Gobelin on October 15th, 1667. So it's a tapestry about the monarch visiting the tapestry manufactory. So this was made at the same place as the video you saw a couple weeks ago. So here is a cabinet by Boule, 1680. This, there is this sort of like, I guess it's like it's a creative element to have figures supporting parts of the furniture. And so here, so this Boule technique of marquetry is the cut metal. And so here is oak veneered with Pasteur and Gabon ebony. Ebony is a wood from Africa. It's an exotic wood. It's beautiful, but especially to get ebony to France at this time would have been a much more costly endeavor. So, and this is a time when, yeah. So, well, this is part of like this sort of, I guess that the presence of ebony means they're in Africa, which is also tied into the excursions into Africa to enslave Africans. So, when I studied history, you just kind of like you realize like the stories. It's not like some of the stories are just it's like it was hard for me to ignore that there was more going on than just like, oh, look at this cool thing, or this interesting like this discovery was made. There's a lot more to it. So be aware. I mean, like I know with some exotic woods, at this point, even just from an environmental standpoint, they should probably just be left where they are, rather than knocking down rainforests to get some cool wood. Anything that comes from like the Amazon should just stay there. Find some domestic alternative. Okay, so you see all that cut metal. So you just saw that little video of that cutting. What's that?
Marquetry.
Yeah, so this is the Boule marquetry. Excuse me. Just a moment here. Okay. Now, so that tortoiseshell, engraved brass, sunburst crown. So the sunburst is like emblematic of Louis XIV. So, one of the reasons to look at this stuff is because of the skill involved, and really the patronage of the French monarch really drove the quality. And so I think, if um, I think we do, we do have wealthy patrons to thank for pushing the skill, because they demanded a high level of craft, and they got it. So, okay, now this I want to go back. This you see these like sculptural pieces that are added to it. It's called ormolu, ORMOLU. They are made. They are like cast metal. They might be pewter or brass, but if you the ormolu technique was to take something like that and fire it with vaporized mercury in a kiln, the way you fire like ceramic or like porcelain, and like that process would give it this really bright gold, this like appearance, like it would make the surface look like bright like gold. And these little like there's like a lot of, you see this like mounts on a lot of this furniture has this like pieces that use the ormolu technique. It was I believe the very first process to be outlawed because it was hazardous. Using mercury is extremely poisonous, and vaporized mercury, it would be very easy to breathe and kill anyone who breathes, like very, slowly kill someone who breathes it. So there were, they were alternatives or like imitations to this process were developed, but it is one of the first to be outlawed for really just, for like the health and safety of the people doing the work. So, and in the, that was, I think in the, I think it was in the, like it was in the 18th or 19th century that was done. And in those days, safety for the people making the stuff was not a concern. So it had to be bad. Okay, so here's a carpet made at Savonnerie. So a lot of carpets were made of wool. There's some detail. And Charles Lebrun was a designer, really, an artist that designed tapestries. Silk, wool, metal thread on canvas. To it. So here is a console table. So a console is meant to be up against a wall. It might have two legs. And it's often the way a console table would be used is on the wall above it would be a mirror. And on the table, you would arrange things like it was like you would have this like little set piece of some of your like maybe porcelain figurines set up on the table. And the reflection of the mirror would sort of seem to expand the space visually. Armchair. So this, so we start to see modern furniture, what really becomes the basis of modern furniture, a fauteuil that is an armchair, like it's like the space underneath the arm is open. So you also have furniture that was made for Louis XIV. And so there is Louis XIV furniture, there is Louis XV furniture, there was Louis XVI furniture. This was commissioned, like these workshops were set up and so that the furniture was commissioned by the French government, by the monarchy, and it was produced for the monarch, and so it bears the name of the monarch. So there is a Louis XIV chair. Another fauteuil. There's another type of chair, an upholstered armchair, where it's like the space below the arm is solid. It's just sort of part of like the structure and the so it's not open underneath the arms, and that is a bergère. We don't see those yet. So that wood is walnut. So fauteuil for the emperor, for the monarch. A pliant. So okay, so here this is a connection with the Romans, with that Sella-Carolus in a way. So a pliant was something that was used at Versailles. So Versailles is where it was like the center of the French government. That was where the court of the monarch was. And so when there were official courts, I guess like an official ceremony, or dignitaries visit Versailles, any member of the nobility that was present, their attendants, everyone had to stand. If you were ever given permission to sit in the presence of the monarch, you had to sit on one of these, and your attendant would rush out and put it down if you were called forward, or you didn't just sit down and scroll through your phone while you were sitting with the monarch. Attention was demanded of you. This pliant is very low, and so it made absolutely certain that if you ever sat down in front of, you had permission to sit in the presence of Louis XIV, you were sitting very low, kind of like a little child. All intentional. These tabourets were also used. All right, this is kind of like a precursor to a chaise lounge, which was really like a long chair. This idea of kind of like a day bed is kind of like you take a chair and stretch it out. A drawing of a sofa. Chimney. Start to see some wall coverings. There's a design for the chimney piece. Yeah, this one, as I like to do, this is a painting from this period of time showing showing an interior. there's something going on, but I'm more interested in the this contemporary image of a French bedchamber from the 1690s. Notice the tapestries. You see, they have the corner. The painter peeled the corner of the tapestry away at the top, so you could see that it is a tapestry hanging on the wall. Parisian fashion, slavery is also part of this culture. Chocolate pot, silver. So chocolate was a luxury, and beautiful objects, no doubt. Okay. Oh yes, the little beauty marks. But again, I'm interested in seeing an image of, this is looks like it's an engraving. A dressing table by the window. Here are some images from some of the manufacturing, like what it looked like. So we saw some of the images of people doing marquetry. This is how these woodworkers would have been set up, each on a long bench, manufacturing furniture. And honestly, some of these work like a woodworker's bench. Whoops. People still use benches, like woodworkers and furniture makers still use benches just like that. They've got these little what's called the bench dog, the little dowel that's stuck in there, and then you'd have like a vise on one end of the table, and you sort of hold something into the vise up against that little peg. Oopsie. So there are also these in Paris. The nobility that were not the monarch still had these elaborate, very elaborate apartments in Paris, and so it's kind of like you see this almost like a mini Versailles in a way in some of these places. No. No. So Paris was, there were still the members of the nobility living in Paris, even though Louis XIV had split for Versailles. Okay. Any questions about this?
So how would we differentiate from French to like both the Baroque styles?
So you made the difference between Italian and French?
Yeah.
Excellent question. I think one of the clearest differences is that a lot of the Italian Baroque centers on church architecture and the Catholic, and they're like the Roman Catholic Church, and it really is a it's almost as if the Baroque, like this style, this very spectacular and theatrical style, is used by the Roman Catholic Church to promote itself. In France, it tends to be centered around the French monarch Louis XIV, and so what we're looking at with French Baroque is really sort of all of it really does come from, I guess you could say, it's the French government. But by government, I mean the monarch. This is not a democratic, you know, this is before the French Revolution. So, and in Italy, you don't have these it was unique that the French set up these workshops that they established, and they knew that they wanted to control. Basically, they wanted to just be able to get exactly what they wanted. And so why not just, I mean, if you could, wouldn't it be kind of cool to just set up your own manufacturing facility and have people there to make for you whatever you wanted whenever you wanted it?
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of nifty. So that's what Louis XIV did, I think, and even before him they were doing, his father, Henry IV, was doing that. And so if you go to Paris and you go to the Louvre Museum, walking through it, you can keep in mind that was once manufacturing for the French monarch.
Okay.
All of those rooms, and it really also the French Baroque starts to give us modern, what might be considered to be modern furniture. For example, Philippe Louis Ghost chair. So Philippe Starck is a contemporary French designer, and you'll see there's a Louis XVI chair that has this sort of oval circular back, and you can find lots of people making this knockoff. So Philippe Starck designed a sort of updated, get away, this more like a modern take on the Louis XVI chair, all made in acrylic.
Mm-hmm.
So just this is a link to the late Baroque, and tells you that we're still working with these ideas.
Style-wise, one is mostly considered in the churches, and other one is for the government of the French. But style,
Yes, it's almost really, and a lot of it was just a lot of it was made for Louis XIV, or members of his court.
style-wise, it almost looks the same.
Yeah, it's very similar. Stylistically, it's very much the same, and it started out that the Italian Baroque, the French recruited Italians to come to France to start doing this work, and then as it grew, they was sort of taken over by French artisans.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now there's a lot to, and so one of the things that's important, mirrors. They really advanced this technology. They really wanted to be able to amplify light at nighttime. And so one of the things that they really like, so this, um, having the manufacturing and always wanting it to be better, and in some cases, like bigger mirrors, higher quality. It really pushed the people doing it to get better at it and figuring out how do we make it larger. And even just they really, I don't know how much was known about even the potential for electrical lighting at this time. Probably not very much. This is Benjamin Franklin is sort of famous for the old, like, the kite with the key tied to the end of the tail of the kite to demonstrate you know some property of electricity, but they were far away from being able to do anything with like sort of control electricity and use it to light anything. So so they were really working with the technology that they had. They just were constantly trying to make it better. And you can imagine that, like, if this imperious monarch would be very difficult to impress once he's already seen excellent work. And I can imagine, like, it was probably very hard on the people that made this stuff, because one mistake, that might be it. You're not doing it anymore. But we still use, so like these, like, this type of furniture, we still use it. And I think that, if you look at some of the Baroque, like the Italian Baroque, the crazy chair with the scrolls and all that, you don't see that around very much. That's a little too over the top for most people. And most people aren't going to go buy a throne to bring home. So a chair like a Louis XIV chair is a little bit more like it. And that's kind of like the model that we're still using. So that's part of where you get like what you can call something. I think you can call something modern. You go back centuries and you can see something that was developed 300, 400 years ago that more or less we still use it. That's one reason. That's one reason to continue looking at it. And this is also, the Baroque is also the era where you see the first sofas.
Yeah, the daybed sort of thing.
Yeah, and upholstery is getting better. It's not until the 19th century that you get upholstery made with springs inside it, so that it can bounce back. But they start to work on. I mean, they knew, like, it was uncomfortable at times. I mean, if you sit in a chair that's like a wooden chair with this, like, a pillow on it, at some point you're going to feel it. And so it's not as if they wanted, like, they were constantly trying to improve the furniture that they were using. Okay.